I'm in Inverbervie. I'm Grace Banks and I have been so excited to come here and learn a little bit more about the history of the town. And today I'm going to share a few stories that I've discovered that you may know something of, but I'm hoping that you can learn a bit more. And the first story we're going to have comes from way back when. The town was hardly in existence. There was a smattering of houses, probably on the hill above the sea. And at that time, the king on the throne of Scotland was Robert the Bruce. Now, Robert the Bruce had a tentative hold on Scotland. It had been a rough time trying to hold on to that throne, for England was a vicious and constant threat. And in-house fighting, my goodness, Robert had his share. And when his son was born in 1324, it wasn't guaranteed that peace would continue to reign. And at the age of 3, very sadly, David's mother died. At the age of 4, the king decided that he needed to make an alliance with England, and so he married his son David to the daughter of King Edward II, Joan. Joan was just 7. The king died when David was 5. A couple of years later, David was crowned King of Scotland. A tiny wee gold crown and a tiny wee gold sceptre in his hand. But unrest. And his guardians decided the best thing for the king was to send him into exile in France. Joan's uncle, King Philip VI, welcomed them warmly, and they stayed in Normandy for the next good while. And David learned to be a knight, and he even fought with the king in his wars. But at the age of 17, it was reckoned it was safe to come back. And so they took a ship and sailed north. Now, the unknown is, were they heading for where Robert the Bruce used to have his castle, which was in Dunfermline, or were they heading to Bervie? Because inland from Bervie is Kincardine Castle. It was a favourite haunt of royalty for hunting. Well, whether or not it was either of the two, something made the captain overshoot the Bervie River. They were meant to anchor south of the Bervie and then take a small boat and land on the shingle beach. But that didn't happen. Whether it was mist or storm, they were pushed north of the river and the ship crashed into the rocks. It was dreadful. The waves and the incoming tide trying to get everybody on shore, but none were lost. But the tide was so high, they could not clamber up onto the cliffs, and they were stuck in this cave, shivering, so destitute. But when the tide receded, they were able to climb up and out, and they clambered down and down towards the river. And then they made their way along the north bank, and one of the men stepped into the river to see where it was shallow enough to cross, because you used to be able to ford the river. And it could be where the footbridge is now, we're not sure. Well, they tried the water of the river, but it was brackish. That means it had the salty taste of the sea. They couldn't drink it, and they were so thirsty. And they made their way up the steep bank of the hill because they could see lights on the top. And on the way up, one person went, there's a spring of water here. And sure enough, beautiful, crystal clear, sweet water to drink. And they all thoroughly enjoyed quenching their thirst. And apparently that spring is still here to this day. So see if you can find it. They clambered right up to the top and they were knocking on the doors and they were welcomed in. What a surprise to have royalty on their doorstep. Well, they were given dry clothing, warm food, and word was sent to the friary, which is just at the top of this brig, and also to Kincardine Castle, that royalty had arrived. And the following morning, after having rested, the Queen was taken to the friary and the King was taken to Kincardine Castle. The following year, David had not forgotten the kindness of Inverbervie, and he announced that this place was going to become a royal borough. And not only that, there would be free fishing for everybody that lived here on the river and on the sea. And you know, it was a royal borough until the 1970s. That's how long it lasted. And with the royal borough came all kinds of brilliant things like markets. And so a marketplace was formed, and in 1737 they got a market cross here. But what shows that David and Joan ever landed here? Well, the very houses where they had hospitality, that became known as David Street. And where they were shipwrecked and hid in the cave, the crag above it is known as Crag David. So there's little indicators of where the King and Queen were. And if you go around the town, you'll find other indicators of other things. And that is our next tale.